Emily. Parker hit the ground running before Ryan Carter's truck door was even open. Barefoot, breathless, screaming his name across the yard like the house behind her was on fire. "Ryan, I have to tell you before you go inside." 3 months he'd been gone, and this was not the homecoming he pictured, because in the 3 seconds it took her to reach him, gasping, gripping his jacket with both fists, Emily said the one sentence that would tear his quiet life wide open. "Your daughter almost lost her room and I never told you." By the end of this story, you'll understand exactly what she was hiding and why the woman next door was never just a neighbor. Before we go further, drop the name of the city you're watching from in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. And if stories like this move, you hit subscribe because there's a lot more waiting for you. Emily Parker hit the driveway running before Ryan Carter's boots even touched the ground. "Ryan, wait. Don't go inside yet. I have to tell you something first." He froze with one hand still on the truck door keys hanging from his fingers. "Emily, what's wrong?" She skidded to a stop in front of him, chest heaving, both hands gripping the front of his jacket like she needed something solid to hold on to. Her eyes were wet, wide, terrified in a way he had never seen on her before. Not in 18 months of casseroles and small talk over the fence. Not even the day she'd shown up 3 weeks after his wife's funeral with a lasagna and no idea what to say. "Your daughter almost lost her room." Emily said the words tumbling out too fast. "And I never told you." For a second, Ryan didn't move, didn't breathe. What? The ceiling. 6 weeks ago. There was a storm and the roof over Lily's bed, it started coming down Ryan. Not leaking, coming down. A whole section of drywall let go in the middle of the night and Her voice cracked and she had to stop, swallow, force herself to keep going. "I got her out. She's fine. She's completely fine. But I need you to know that before you walk through that door and see the room and start asking questions, because I didn't tell you while it was happening, and I need to be the one who tells you now, not you finding out from a stain on the ceiling." Ryan's whole body had gone cold. "The ceiling came down," he repeated slowly, like saying it out loud might make it make sense. "On my daughter. Not on her, near her. She woke up because of the sound, and I was already coming to check because the storm was so bad, and I got her out of that room in under a minute. Ryan, I promise you, under a minute. You were already coming to check." His voice had gone flat, strange, a voice he didn't recognize as his own. "In the middle of the night, in a storm. I check on her sometimes when you're gone and the weather's bad, you know that." I didn't know that. He heard how sharp it came out and didn't try to soften it. "I didn't know any of this, Emily. Not one word of it. 3 months of phone calls and you never once said, 'I know.' A section of the ceiling fell, on my daughter's bed. I know, Ryan. And you're telling me now, standing in the driveway, before I've even had a chance to put my bag down, because I couldn't let you walk in there blind." Emily's hands were still fisted in his jacket, and she didn't let go. Didn't step back, even as his voice climbed. "I couldn't let you see that room and not understand what happened, and I couldn't let another 5 minutes go by with you not knowing, because you deserve to know. And I have been carrying this for 6 weeks by myself, and I am so tired, Ryan. I am so tired." Something in her voice broke on that last word, and it did something to him, cut straight through the anger, straight to the fear underneath it. The fear that had been sitting in his chest since the second she said, "Ceiling and fell, and your daughter." "Where is she right now?" Ryan said. "Where's Lily right now this second?" "At my house, watching a movie." "She's fine, Ryan. I promise you she is completely fine. She doesn't even remember it that clearly anymore. Kids bounce back faster than—" "I need to see her." "Okay. Right now. Okay, let's go." But he didn't move. He stood there in his own driveway, with his hand still wrapped around his truck keys, staring at the house he'd left 3 months ago, looking for the first time at the roofline, the way a father looks at a house, instead of the way a contractor looks at a job site. And there, now that he was actually looking, he could see it. A patch over the back bedroom, newer shingles laid in slightly wrong close enough that a stranger wouldn't notice. But Ryan Carter had spent 15 years reading roof lines for a living, and he noticed everything. "How bad?" he said quietly. "Tell me how bad it actually was." "Ryan." "Emily. How bad?" She let go of his jacket for the first time, took half a step back, and wrapped her own arms around herself instead, like she needed something to hold now that she wasn't holding him. "Bad," she admitted. "The whole section over her bed. Insulation drywall. Some of the framing was compromised too, where water had been sitting for who knows how long before the storm finally finished the job. If I hadn't gotten her out when I did." She stopped. "Say it." "I don't want to say it." "Emily, say it." "If I'd been 30 seconds slower, it would have come down on top of her," Emily said, and her voice was barely above a whisper now, like the words themselves hurt to let out. "That's why I ran over here tonight before you even parked Ryan, because I have replayed those 30 seconds every single night for 6 weeks, and I needed you to hear it from me, standing here looking at me, not from a text message, not from some careful phone call where I picked my words for an hour before I called." Ryan closed his eyes. For a moment, he was back on a job site, 4 states away, unloading a truck of lumber. His phone buzzing in his pocket with Lily's voice on the other end saying, "Good night, Daddy," in that small, flat tone. And the whole time, this had already happened. Already come and gone. His daughter had already been in danger and already been saved, and he hadn't known a single thing about it. Hadn't felt a single tremor of it, had just kept unloading lumber, 4 states away, like nothing in the world was wrong. "I left her here," he said more to himself than to Emily. "I left her here and something almost happened to her and I wasn't even in the same state." "You didn't do anything wrong." "I wasn't here, Emily." "You were working. You were doing what you had to do to keep a roof over her head in the first place. That's not a crime." "It feels like one right now." Emily reached for him again this time, just his hand, just her fingers wrapping around his, and Ryan let her because he didn't have the strength in that moment to pull away from the one steady thing in front of him. "Come inside," she said. "See her. See that she's fine. And then I'll tell you everything, every single detail, and you can be as angry at me as you need to be. But see her first." Lily was curled up on Emily's couch under a blanket covered in cartoon foxes, so absorbed in whatever was playing on the television that she didn't hear the front door open. Ryan stood in the doorway for a full 10 seconds, just looking at her, the messy braid Emily had clearly done that morning, one sock half off the particular slouch of a kid who felt completely unquestionably safe in the room she was sitting in. Lily. She turned, and her whole face lit up, and she was off the couch and across the room before Ryan had even finished crouching down to catch her. "Daddy?" "You're early," Emily said Tuesday, and it's Tuesday, "but I didn't think you'd come get me from her house. I thought you'd go to our house first." "I wanted to see you first," Ryan said, and his voice came out thicker than he wanted it to, because he was holding his daughter and thinking about a ceiling and 30 seconds and everything that hadn't happened, only because Emily Parker had been listening for a storm in the middle of the night. "Are you crying?" Lily pulled back, studying him with that same unbearable scrutiny from before. "No, allergies. It's October. October allergies, very common." Lily didn't look convinced, but she let it go the way kids do, filing it away, without needing an explanation, and climbed straight back into the crook of his arm, like she'd never left it. Over her head, Ryan looked at Emily, who was standing in the doorway now, with her arms still wrapped around herself, watching the two of them with an expression that made something in Ryan's chest tighten in a completely different way than the fear had. "Hey, Bug," he said. "Did something scary happen at our house while I was gone? Something with your room?" Lily went still against him. "Emily said I shouldn't worry you about it." "I'm asking you to tell me." Lily glanced toward Emily, who gave the smallest nod, permission granted, and then Lily turned back to her father, her small face suddenly serious, in a way that 8-year-olds' faces aren't supposed to get. "There was a really loud noise," she said, "like a crash, and I woke up and my room was all dusty, and there was a big hole where the ceiling used to be right by my bed, and I was really scared, but then Emily came in and picked me up so fast, and she said it was okay, and she carried me all the way to her house in her pajamas, and it was raining really hard, and she didn't even have shoes on." "She didn't have shoes on," Ryan repeated. "No. And she let me sleep in her bed that night because I didn't want to be alone, and she stayed up the whole time even though I fell asleep because I woke up once, and she was still sitting there." Ryan looked at Emily. Emily looked at the floor. "Is that true?" he asked. "You didn't sleep." "I slept eventually." Emily: "I wanted to make sure she was really okay. That's all. It's not a big deal. You ran into a collapsing room in the middle of a storm with no shoes on, and then sat up all night making sure my daughter was safe, and you're telling me it's not a big deal." "I'm telling you it's what anyone would have done." "No," Ryan said, and something in his voice made both Emily and Lily go quiet. "It's not what anyone would have done. It's what you did. There's a difference." Lily, sensing the shift in the air, the way kids always do, wriggled slightly in his arms. "Are you guys fighting?" "No, Bug." Ryan pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "We're not fighting. Why don't you go pick out a movie for tonight? We're staying here a little longer, and I need to talk to Emily about grown-up stuff." Lily brightened instantly at the prospect of a second movie, and scrambled back toward the couch, the whole conversation already forgotten in the way only childhood allows. Ryan straightened up slowly, and when he looked at Emily again, the exhaustion on her face had a different quality to it. Now, not tired from lack of sleep, but tired from carrying a secret she'd been terrified to put down. "Kitchen," she said quietly. "Let's talk in the kitchen." The moment they were alone out of Lily's earshot, Ryan's carefully held composure started to crack. "You ran into a room with a collapsing ceiling." Ryan: "With no shoes on, in a storm. At what, 2 a.m, 3? "I don't remember exactly what time it was. I wasn't checking a clock. I was checking on your daughter." "You could have been hurt." "I wasn't." "You could have been. But I wasn't Ryan, and she wasn't. And that's the only part of this that actually matters." Emily's voice rose to match his for the first time, sharp and fast, all her carefully managed calm finally giving way. "You want to stand here and interrogate me about the 2 seconds of danger I was in? Fine, interrogate me. But don't you dare make this about anything other than the fact that your daughter is alive and unhurt and sleeping soundly every night since, because I made sure of it. I'm not questioning that you saved her." "Then what are you questioning?" "I'm questioning why I didn't know." The words came out louder than he meant them to, loud enough that he immediately glanced toward the doorway, toward the sound of the television still playing, and dropped his voice back down. "I'm questioning why my daughter almost got hurt, and I found out about it standing in a driveway 3 months after the fact instead of the night it happened. I'm questioning why you thought that decision was yours to make instead of mine." Emily's jaw tightened. "Because I know you, Ryan Carter. I have known you for 18 months, and I know exactly what would have happened if I'd called you that night. You would have dropped everything. You would have driven 8 hours through a storm in the dark, exhausted, panicked, and either wrecked your truck doing it, or shown up here, so rattled you couldn't function. And either way, you would have lost the job that's putting food on your table, and a roof, a real roof this time, over both your heads. That's not your decision to make. Somebody had to make it. You weren't here to make it, so I made it. I'm her father. I know that. I'm the only parent she has left, Emily, and you made a decision about her safety without me, and I understand why I do. But you have to understand why that terrifies me. What if it happens again? What if next time you're not fast enough, or you're not even here, and I'm 4 states away not knowing anything is wrong until it's too late?" The kitchen went quiet. Somewhere in the other room, Lily laughed at something on the television, a small bright sound that neither of them acknowledged. "You think I don't lie awake thinking about that exact thing?" Emily said, finally, her voice much smaller now. "You think that night didn't change something in me too? I have replayed those 30 seconds every night for 6 weeks, Ryan. I hear that crash in my sleep. I have started sleeping with my phone on the loudest setting right next to my pillow in case it happens again, and I need to hear it. I check the weather forecast for this street like it's my job now." Ryan stared at her. You didn't have to do any of that. I know I didn't have to. I chose to. Emily's eyes were wet again, and this time she didn't try to hide it. Because somewhere along the way, Ryan, without ever deciding to, I started loving that little girl like she was mine to protect. And I started loving. She stopped herself. Hard physically flinched at her own almost sentence, and turned away toward the counter, busying her hands with a coffee mug that didn't need moving. Finish it, Ryan said quietly. Don't. Emily, finish the sentence. It doesn't matter right now. We're talking about the roof and the ceiling and the insurance company, and none of that has anything to do with, it has everything to do with it. Ryan crossed the kitchen close enough now that she had to either look at him or very deliberately keep not looking at him, and she chose the second, staring hard at the coffee mug in her hands like it held the answer to something. You ran into a collapsing room for my daughter. You sat up all night to make sure she was okay. You fought an insurance company for weeks. You did all of it without telling me, without asking for a single thing in return, and you almost just told me why. Ryan? Say it. I can't. Why not? Emily set the mug down harder than she meant to, the sound sharp in the quiet kitchen. When she finally turned to face him, her whole expression had cracked open every carefully held wall down at once. Because you just got home, she said. Because you're exhausted, and your daughter almost got hurt, and the very last thing you need tonight is your neighbor unloading a year and a half of feelings she swore she'd never say out loud. Because if I say it and you don't feel the same way, I don't just lose you, Ryan. I lose Lily, too. I lose the only family that's felt like mine since my own fell apart, and I am not ready to risk that. Not tonight. Not like this. For a long moment, Ryan said nothing at all. Then he reached out slowly, giving her every chance to step back if she wanted to, and took the mug gently out of her hands, setting it aside on the counter, freeing both of her hands so he could hold them in his own. You almost lost her, he said quietly. That night. If you'd been 30 seconds slower. Ryan, please don't. I need you to hear this part, he said, and his voice was steady now, steadier than it had been all night, like something in him had finally settled into certainty. I have spent 3 months telling myself that what I feel for you is gratitude. That it's just relief, just a neighbor being kind, just convenient timing because I happen to live next to someone generous. I have told myself that story every single night since I left, and I believed it mostly because believing anything else felt like too much to carry on top of everything else I'm carrying. Ryan. But you just told me you ran into a falling ceiling for my daughter with no shoes on. You told me you've been sleeping with your phone against your pillow for 6 weeks because you're scared of losing her too. That's not a neighbor, Emily. That's not gratitude I'm supposed to feel back at you. That's something else, and I think you know exactly what it is because you just tried to say it and stopped yourself. Emily's eyes were full now, spilling over, and she didn't wipe them away. If I say it, she whispered, there's no taking it back. I've thought this 100 times and stopped myself 100 times because once I say it out loud, I can't pretend anymore. I can't go back to being just the woman next door who waters your plants. I don't want you to be just the woman next door who waters my plants. Ryan. I want to know what you were about to say. The kitchen was silent, except for the faint sound of the television down the hall, and Lily's occasional laugh, oblivious to the 2 adults standing 3 feet away from each other, with a year and a half of unsaid things finally rising to the surface. Emily took a breath that shook on the way in. I love her, she said. I love Lily like she's mine. And somewhere along the way, loving her stopped being separate from. A crash sounded from the living room, followed immediately by Lily's voice, high and alarmed. Daddy, Emily. Come quick. I dropped the popcorn bowl and it's everywhere, and I think I stepped on glass. Both of them moved at once, the moment shattering as fast as it had built, adrenaline replacing everything else in an instant. Ryan was through the kitchen doorway first. Emily right behind him. Both of them converging on the living room, where Lily stood frozen in a spreading mess of popcorn and shattered glass. One bare foot lifted off the ground, her face already crumpling toward tears. Don't move, Bug, don't move an inch, Ryan said, already crouching, already scanning her foot for blood. his heart hammering with a fear that had nothing to do with roofs or insurance companies and everything to do with the simple animal terror of my kid, is hurt. "It's okay, I don't think you're cut," Emily said, kneeling on the other side of Lily, carefully checking the sole of her foot with gentle fingers. "I think you just felt the glass, not stepped on it. Let's get you picked up and out of here before we check for real, okay?" Ryan scooped Lily up in one motion glass, crunching somewhere beneath his own boots as he carried her clear of the mess and set her down safely on the far side of the room, checking her foot himself. Now turning it over in the lamplight with the same careful precision he'd bring to inspecting a job site for hazards. No cuts, no blood. Just a scare, small and fast, and over almost as soon as it started. But it left something behind in the room, a reminder sharp and immediate of exactly how fast the ground could shift under a family that had already had it shift once before, of exactly why Emily Parker had run into a collapsing room without stopping to put on shoes, of exactly why she'd spent 6 weeks lying awake with her phone against her pillow. Lily, reassured that she wasn't hurt, was already recovering with the resilience only children have, more upset about the wasted popcorn than the almost injury. But Ryan crouched in front of his daughter with his hand still wrapped protectively around her ankle. Looked up and found Emily watching them both from across the room. Her own face pale, her arms wrapped tight around herself again. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, though it wasn't clear anymore whether she was apologizing for the popcorn, or the ceiling, or the sentence she hadn't finished, or all of it at once. "Don't," Ryan said. "Don't apologize, not for any of it." He looked back down at his daughter, safe unhurt, chattering already about wanting a new bowl of popcorn, like the crash had never happened, and something settled hard and certain in Ryan's chest, a decision he hadn't known he was making until it was already made. Whatever Emily had been about to say in that kitchen, he was going to hear the rest of it tonight. Not tomorrow. Not after the glass was swept up and Lily was tucked into bed, and the ordinary business of the evening had swallowed the moment whole the way ordinary business always did. Tonight. Because a woman who ran into a falling room with no shoes on, who fought insurance companies at midnight, who slept with her phone against her pillow for 6 weeks out of fear for a child that wasn't even hers, that woman didn't get to almost say something that important, and then let it disappear into a spilled bowl of popcorn. Not on his watch. Not anymore. Lily was still talking about the popcorn bowl 20 minutes later, propped up in Emily's guest bed, with her foot examined twice more just to be safe, insisting the whole time that she was basically a doctor now. Because she knew what a cut was supposed to look like, and hers definitely wasn't one. Ryan sat on the edge of the bed, running his thumb absently over her small ankle, listening to her chatter with half his attention, while the other half stayed locked on the kitchen down the hall, on the sentence Emily had started, and never finished, on the word love hanging in the air between them, like something neither of them had dared to catch yet. "Daddy, you're not listening." "I'm listening." "What did I just say?" "You said something about the popcorn." Lily rolled her eyes with the exact same expression her mother used to make, and it hit Ryan square in the chest, the way it always did, quick and sharp and gone before he could brace for it. "I said Emily let me have 2 bowls tonight because the first one broke, and that's basically the best rule ever, and we should keep it forever." "We are not making that a rule." "Emily would let me." "Emily spoils you." "Emily loves me," Lily said simply, like it was the most obvious fact in the world. The sky is blue, water is wet. Emily loves me. She said it without any weight at all, without knowing that 4 rooms away her father had just spent the last hour circling that exact sentence like it might detonate if he got too close. Ryan cleared his throat. "Yeah, she does." "Do you love her too?" The question landed like a stone dropped straight down a well, and Ryan felt the silence stretch a half-second too long before he answered. "Go to sleep, bug." That's not a no. It's also not a yes. It's a go-to sleep. Lily grinned, satisfied with herself, in the particular way of a child who has just successfully cornered an adult and let her father tuck the blanket up around her shoulders without further interrogation. He kissed her forehead, told her he loved her more than every star combined, waited until her breathing evened out into the slow rhythm of real sleep, and then sat there, another full minute in the dark, just watching her chest rise and fall. Still not quite able to shake the image of a ceiling coming down 4 feet from where she'd been sleeping. When he finally stood and made his way back toward the kitchen, he found Emily on her knees on the living room floor, finishing the last of the glass cleanup, a dustpan in one hand and a flashlight from her phone in the other, checking every inch of carpet twice. "You don't have to do that. I want to make sure there's nothing left. Kids find glass with their feet in ways adults never do." Ryan crouched down beside her, took the dustpan gently out of her hand and set it aside. "Emily, I already checked the whole rug, Ryan, there's nothing." "Emily, look at me." She sat back on her heels, slowly, and in the low lamplight, her face looked younger somehow, stripped of all the careful composure she usually wore like armor. The tears from earlier had dried, but the rawness underneath them hadn't gone anywhere. It was still right there, sitting just under the surface. "You were about to tell me something," Ryan said, before Lily dropped the bowl. "I know. I'd like to hear the rest of it." Emily's throat moved as she swallowed. For a moment, she looked like she might actually get up, might find some reason to busy her hands with the vacuum or the dishes, or anything at all. That wasn't this conversation sitting cross-legged on her own living room floor at 9 o'clock at night, with the man she'd been in love with for longer than she'd ever admitted even to herself. "I told you I love Lily," she said finally. "Like she's mine." "You did. And I told you loving her stopped being separate from something else." Her voice was barely above a whisper now. "I think you already know what that something else is, Ryan. I think you've known for a while. I think maybe you've known longer than I have." Ryan reached out and took her hand the same way he had in the kitchen, and this time she didn't pull it back or look away. "Say it anyway," he said. "I need to hear you say it." Emily closed her eyes for a moment like she was gathering the last of her courage from somewhere deep, somewhere that had been guarding this particular truth for a very long time. "I love you," she said. "I have loved you since before I even let myself notice it was happening, since the casserole, since before that probably, if I'm honest, since the day you helped me carry my groceries in during a rainstorm and made some terrible joke about the weather, just to keep me from feeling awkward about dropping a bag of oranges all over your driveway." Ryan let out a breath he felt like he'd been holding for 18 months. "I remember the oranges." "Of course you remember the oranges." A small wet laugh escaped her. "You remember everything, Ryan Carter. That's part of the problem. I could never just quietly love you from next door because you kept noticing things. You noticed when I was tired. You noticed when something was wrong. You noticed tonight in the driveway before I even said a word that something had happened. I noticed because I care about you. I know that now. I've known it for a while, actually, if I'm being honest with myself. I just didn't let myself believe it meant what I wanted it to mean, because you're a single father who lost his wife and the last thing on earth you need is your neighbor deciding she's in love with you and making everything complicated. You didn't make anything complicated. I ran into your house in a storm and slept with your daughter for 11 nights and fought your insurance company and never told you any of it happened." Emily said, a note of disbelief creeping into her own voice like she was only now hearing the full shape of what she'd done. "That's not exactly uncomplicated, Ryan." "No," he admitted. "It's not uncomplicated, but it's not a problem either. Emily, listen to me." He shifted closer, still holding her hand, his thumb tracing slow circles over her knuckles like he was trying to steady both of them at once. "I have spent 3 months on job sites, 4 states away, lying in hotel beds at midnight, thinking about you instead of sleeping. Wondering what you were doing. Wondering if you were thinking about me too. Telling myself it didn't mean anything, because it was easier than admitting what it actually meant." "And what did it mean?" "It meant I was already halfway in love with you before tonight," Ryan said. "And everything you just told me, the ceiling, the storm, Lily, all of it, it didn't create this feeling, Emily. It just made it impossible to keep pretending it wasn't there." For a moment, neither of them said anything at all. The lamp buzzed faintly. Somewhere down the hall, Lily shifted in her sleep and mumbled something unintelligible before going still again. Emily's eyes were wet again, but this time she was smiling through it, a small disbelieving smile, like she still wasn't fully convinced this was real. "So what happens now?" she asked. Ryan didn't answer with words. He leaned in slowly, giving her every chance in the world to pull back, and when she didn't, when instead she leaned in to meet him halfway, her free hand coming up to rest against his jaw like she'd been waiting 18 months for permission to do exactly that, he kissed her. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't desperate. It was the kind of kiss that comes after a year and a half of almost slow and certain and a little bit disbelieving, both of them pulling back after a few seconds, just to look at each other like they needed to confirm it had actually happened. "Okay." Emily breathed a laugh, bubbling up through the tears. "Okay, that happened." That happened," Ryan agreed, and he was smiling too, an actual real smile, the kind he hadn't worn easily in longer than he wanted to admit. And then from the pocket of his jacket still hanging off the back of a kitchen chair, where he'd tossed it on his way to check on Lily, his phone began to ring. Loud, insistent, cutting through the moment like a blade. Emily's smile faltered slightly. "You should probably get that." "It can wait. Ryan, it's 10 o'clock at night. Nobody calls at 10 o'clock at night unless it's important." He hesitated, torn between the woman in front of him and the phone screaming from his jacket pocket, and finally reluctantly pushed himself up to answer it, mostly because some old instinct from years of emergency job site calls told him that ignoring a 10 p.m. phone call rarely ended well. The screen read, Derek Mason, his old business partner. The man who'd helped him land the current contract. The man who never called this late, unless something had gone sideways. Ryan answered, and Emily watched his face change in real time, the warmth from a moment ago draining out of it, replaced by something tight and careful. The expression of a man doing math he didn't want to do. "Derek, yeah. No, I just got in tonight." A pause. "What do you mean permanently?" Another pause, longer this time, and Ryan's jaw worked like he was chewing on something bitter. "That's not what we discussed when I signed on. I signed on for a rebuild contract, not a relocation." Emily sat frozen on the floor, watching him pace slowly toward the window, one hand raking through his hair. "How long do I have to decide?" Ryan said into the phone. A pause. "That's not a lot of time, Derek." Another pause. "I have an 8-year-old daughter. I can't just—" He cut himself off, listened for a long moment, his expression darkening further. "Yeah, I hear you. I hear what you're saying about the position and the pay bump I do, but this isn't a decision I can make standing in my neighbor's living room at 10 at night. I'll call you back tomorrow." He hung up and for a moment just stood there facing the window, his back to Emily, his shoulders set in a hard, tired line. "Ryan?" "They want me to relocate," he said, not turning around. "Permanently. Not another rebuild contract, not another 3-month rotation. A permanent transfer. Different state. New office, new team, better pay, better everything according to Derek." Emily felt the floor tilt slightly beneath her, the warmth of the last 5 minutes suddenly very far away. "When did this come up?" "Apparently it's been on the table for a few weeks. Derek's been trying to reach me, but I've been on site with spotty signal." Ryan finally turned around, and the look on his face was somewhere between exhaustion and dread. "He needs an answer by the end of next week." "That's fast." "That's fast," he agreed. Neither of them said the obvious thing out loud, that 5 minutes ago they'd just kissed for the first time after 18 months of pretending they hadn't wanted to. And now, here was a phone call threatening to pull Ryan 3 states away, permanently taking Lily with him, leaving Emily exactly where she'd started, next door to an empty house. "You don't have to decide tonight," Emily said carefully, though her voice had gone thin. "No, I don't." "But you're thinking about it." "I'm thinking about a lot of things right now, Emily." She nodded slowly, arms wrapping around herself again in that same protective posture from earlier, and Ryan watched something close behind her eyes, some door she'd only just opened sliding halfway shut again. "I'm not going anywhere tonight," he said, crossing back toward her, crouching down again so they were at eye level. I'm not going to let one phone call undo 5 minutes ago. I just need you to give me a little room to think, because this is exactly the kind of decision I can't make on adrenaline and a kiss, even a kiss that good. That got a small reluctant smile out of her. Fine, take your room. Thank you. But Ryan... Her voice caught slightly. If the answer ends up being yes if you take it, I'm not deciding tonight. I know. I'm just telling you before you go home and lie awake thinking about it alone, that whatever you decide, I need you to actually talk to me about it. Not protect me from it the way you protect everyone from everything. Not disappear into your own head and hand me a decision after it's already made. Talk to me while you're making it. Ryan reached up and brushed a strand of hair back from her face, something tender in the gesture that made Emily's breath catch all over again, despite the fear still sitting cold in her chest. I can do that, he said. I promise you, I can do that. Thud. He carried Lily home asleep in his arms an hour later, her small body limp and warm against his shoulder, and laid her down in her own bed for the first time in 3 months. Except her bed wasn't in her own room anymore. He realized with a jolt, standing in the hallway, staring at a closed door he hadn't thought to ask about. Emily, following behind him with an armful of Lily's things from the guest room, caught the direction of his gaze. I moved her stuff into the room across the hall, she said quietly. Temporarily. Until the repairs are fully finished and everything's inspected and cleared. The contractor said another week, maybe 2. Ryan pushed open the door to what used to be his home office and found it transformed Lily's bed against the far wall. Her nightlight plugged in her stuffed animals, arranged in the exact particular order she insisted on, a hand-drawn sign taped crookedly to the door that read, Lily's temporary room, in green marker misspelling and all. You did all this. I had help. She picked the sign herself. Emily set the last of Lily's things down on the dresser, careful not to wake her, as Ryan laid her gently in the bed and pulled the blanket up. I wanted her to feel like it was an adventure instead of something scary. Kids need a story to hold on to. Your room is temporarily unavailable due to storm damage is scary. You get a secret temporary room until your real one gets fixed is an adventure. Ryan stood there in the doorway of his own former office, looking at the careful, thoughtful work that had clearly gone into making his daughter feel safe in the middle of a crisis he hadn't even known was happening, and felt something in his chest ache in the particular way gratitude sometimes does. Sharp, almost painful, entirely disproportionate to something as simple as a nightlight and a hand-drawn sign. I don't know how to thank you for this, he said, for any of it. You don't have to thank me. I told you that already. I know. I'm going to keep trying anyway. They stood together for a moment in the hallway of his house, the house that had almost lost part of its roof, the house Emily had quietly held together with phone calls and sleepless nights, and a stubborn refusal to let anything bad happen to a family that wasn't technically hers. And Ryan felt the weight of the phone call from earlier pressing back in on him, insistent, impossible to ignore. I should let you get home, he said. It's late. Yeah. Emily lingered a second longer than necessary, like she wanted to say something else and couldn't quite find the shape of it. Ryan. Yeah. Whatever Derek said tonight, I meant what I told you back at my place. I'm not asking you to choose me over your job. I would never ask you to do that. I just need you to remember that you're allowed to want something for yourself too. You've spent so long only making decisions based on what's safest for Lily that I don't think you remember how to ask what you actually want. Ryan didn't have an answer for that right away, mostly because she was right, and hearing it out loud landed harder than he expected. Good night, Emily. Good night, Ryan. She left, and the house went quiet, in the particular way houses go quiet, after someone leaves them a little emptier than it was a moment before the silence suddenly noticeable in a way it hadn't been. He didn't sleep much that night. He lay awake in his own bed, staring at a ceiling that had not thankfully collapsed, running the numbers Derek had given him over and over in his head. A 40% pay increase. Full benefits better than his current contract. A permanent position instead of the endless string of 3-month emergency rotations that had already cost him 3 months of his daughter's childhood and nearly cost her a roof over her bed. On paper, it was everything he should have wanted, but it meant leaving. Not for 3 months. For good. It meant pulling Lily out of the only school she'd ever known, away from the only home she remembered, away from a woman who had just spent 6 weeks quietly protecting her from a collapsing ceiling, because she loved her like her own. It meant leaving Emily. Around 1 in the morning, unable to sleep, Ryan found himself standing at the window of his bedroom, looking out at the dark shape of Emily's house next door, one light still burning in her kitchen window. He wondered if she was awake too. Lying there running the same math, he was wondering if the last 5 minutes of joy she'd finally allowed herself were about to be undone by a job offer 3 states away. He almost texted her, almost picked up the phone right then and called because she'd asked him to talk to her while he was deciding instead of after, and some part of him wanted to honor that, immediately wanted to prove he'd actually heard her. But it was 1 in the morning, and she'd had 11 sleepless nights already, because of him, because of his family, because of a ceiling that fell while he was somewhere else entirely. He wasn't going to be the reason she lost a 12th. He put the phone down and forced himself to close his eyes instead, and eventually, sometime after 2, exhaustion won out over everything else, and he slept. Morning came fast and loud, the way mornings with an 8-year-old always do. Lily was up before 7, bouncing into his room already fully dressed, insisting they needed pancakes because it was a welcome home tradition that Emily had apparently established during his absence and which Lily now considered sacred law. Pancakes are not a tradition, Bug, they're breakfast. They're a tradition now. Emily says traditions are just things you do more than once on purpose. Ryan couldn't argue with that logic, mostly because he didn't have the energy to. And so 20 minutes later, he found himself standing at his own stove for the first time in 3 months, flipping pancakes badly, while Lily narrated a detailed account of everything he'd missed. The school talent show she'd been in, a friend named Marcus, who apparently had a pet lizard now, and with far less enthusiasm than the lizard deserved, based on her tone. The fact that her math teacher had assigned way too much homework during his absence. He was halfway through the pancake narration when his phone buzzed on the counter. A text from Derek. Company wants to sweeten the deal signing bonus on top of the raise if you commit by Friday instead of next week. Let me know. Friday. 2 days sooner than he'd been told the night before. Ryan set the phone face down on the counter harder than he meant to, and Lily glanced up from her plate. Who is that? Nobody important. You made your mad face. I don't have a mad face. You totally have a mad face. It's the same one you make when the GPS says there's traffic. Despite everything sitting heavy in his chest, Ryan laughed short and a little rough and reached over to ruffle her hair. Eat your pancakes, Bug. They were interrupted by a knock at the door, sharp businesslike, not Emily's familiar rhythm. Ryan opened it to find a man in a polo shirt with a company logo stitched over the pocket clipboard in hand, a work van parked in the driveway behind him. Mr. Carter, I'm here about the roof inspection. Emily Parker set this up a few weeks back, said you'd probably want a final walkthrough once you got home to sign off on the completed work. Of course she had. Ryan felt a fresh wave of something gratitude tangled up with a strange aching guilt at the realization that Emily had been thinking 3 steps ahead of him this whole time, arranging things, not just to protect his daughter in the moment, but to make sure he'd have everything in order the second he walked back into his own life. Yeah, Ryan said. Come on in, let's take a look. The inspector walked him through the repaired section, methodically pointing out the new framing. The fresh insulation, the shingles that matched the original roofline almost seamlessly, exactly as Emily had promised weeks ago, exactly as she'd fought a contractor over refusing to let anyone cut corners on the room where his daughter slept. Whoever coordinated this did a hell of a job staying on top of the insurance company, the inspector said, flipping through his clipboard. Had documentation ready for every single call. Photos, dates, everything. Made my job a lot easier, honestly. Most homeowners let this kind of thing drag for months. She's not the homeowner, Ryan said quietly. She's my neighbor. The inspector raised an eyebrow, glanced around the newly repaired room, then back at Ryan, with the faint, knowing look of a man who'd clearly seen this particular story before in one form or another. "Must be a hell of a neighbor." "Yeah," Ryan said, and something in his chest tightened around the word. "She is." By early afternoon, Lily was off at Marcus's house for a promised playdate involving the lizard, and Ryan found himself standing in his own backyard, staring at the orange construction fencing that still marked the boundary line between his property and Emily's phone, in his hand. Derek's text still unanswered. He typed 3 different replies and deleted all of them. He was still standing there, phone in hand, indecision sitting heavy in his chest when he heard Emily's back door open and her footsteps cross the grass toward him. No running this time, just an easy, unhurried walk, though he could see the slight tension in her shoulders that told him she already knew something was weighing on him. "You've been standing here staring at a piece of orange plastic fencing for 10 minutes, she said. "Either it's fascinating in a way I'm not appreciating, or something's wrong." Derek texted again. Emily's expression flickered just slightly. "And they moved the deadline up, Friday instead of next week. There's a signing bonus if I commit early." "That's a lot of pressure for a 2-day difference." "It's a sales tactic." "I know it's a sales tactic. Derek's good at his job, and part of his job is making me feel like I'll lose something if I don't move fast." Ryan rubbed a hand over his face, exhaustion from the sleepless night finally catching up with him. "I just don't know what the right answer is, Emily. On paper, it's everything I should want. More money, more stability, no more 3-month rotations tearing me away from Lily every few months. But it means leaving." He finally looked at her directly. "It means pulling her out of school. It means leaving the house her mother decorated the nursery in before she was even born. It means leaving—" He stopped himself, but not fast enough. "Me," Emily finished quietly. "It means leaving me." "Yeah." The word sat between them, heavy and honest, and for a moment, Emily just looked at him. Something complicated, moving behind her eyes, hope and fear tangled together so tightly, it was hard to tell where one ended and the other began. "I told you last night I wasn't going to ask you to choose me," she said. "I meant that. I still mean it, but I'm not going to pretend it doesn't scare me, Ryan. 24 hours ago, I finally said the thing I've been sitting on for 18 months, and now I'm standing in my backyard watching you decide whether to move 3 states away. I haven't decided anything. I know, but you're going to have to, and soon. And I need you to know that whatever you choose, I'm not going to fall apart over it. I've built a life on my own before. I can do it again if I have to." Her voice wavered slightly on the last part, betraying the bravado underneath it. I finally let myself hope for something different, that's all. And now there's a very real chance I get to watch it drive away in a moving truck." Ryan crossed the yard and took both her hands in his, the same way he had the night before. An anchor he seemed to be reaching for instinctively now, whenever the ground felt unsteady beneath either of them. "I'm not going to make this decision alone," he said. "I told you that last night and I meant it. But I need you to understand something too, Emily. Whatever I decide, it's not going to be a decision made against you. If I take this job, it's not because you don't matter enough to stay for. And if I turn it down, it's not going to be some grand romantic gesture I'll resent you for later. I need to make the right decision for Lily and for me. And I need to make it clearly without either of us pretending the fear isn't there." "That's fair," Emily said, though her voice still shook slightly. "There's something else," Ryan added. And something in his tone made Emily go, still bracing for whatever was coming next. "Derek mentioned something last night that I didn't tell you. The position isn't just any transfer. It's a promotion. Regional supervisor. It would mean I stop traveling entirely. No more 3-month rotations, ever. I'd be based in one office, one location home every single night." Emily blinked. "That's Ryan, that's huge. That's everything you've wanted since Lily was born. You've said so yourself 100 times." "I know. So what's the problem?" "The problem is the office is in Colorado," Ryan said quietly. 14 hours from here. And I don't know how to want the thing I've always wanted if getting it means losing the thing I just found. Emily's breath caught, and for a long moment, neither of them said anything at all. The weight of the impossible choice settling heavy and real between them, no easy answer waiting anywhere in sight. It was Emily who finally broke the silence. Her voice quiet but steady, steadier than Ryan expected, given everything sitting underneath it. "Then don't decide today," she said. "Don't decide tomorrow either if you don't have to. Take whatever time Derek's willing to give you, even if it's less than you want, and use every single hour of it. Talk to Lily. Talk to me. Figure out what you actually want underneath the fear, because I think right now you're so scared of making the wrong choice that you can't even hear yourself thinking." You make it sound simple. It's not simple. It's the opposite of simple. But you don't have to solve it standing in a backyard staring at construction fencing. A small, tired smile broke through despite everything. "Come inside. I'll make coffee. We'll figure out the actual deadline and the actual math and the actual questions that matter, instead of just standing out here spiraling separately." Ryan let out a breath, some of the tension in his shoulders easing slightly at the simple, practical steadiness in her voice, the same steadiness he realized that had gotten his daughter out of a collapsing room in under a minute, that had fought an insurance company for weeks without losing her composure, that had built a hand-drawn sign to turn a crisis into an adventure for an 8-year-old who needed exactly that. "Okay," he said. "Coffee, and then we figure it out. Together. Together." Ryan agreed, and for the first time since Derek's phone call had shattered the best moment of the last 3 months, the word felt less like a threat and more like the beginning of an answer. They were halfway across the yard toward Emily's back door when Ryan's phone buzzed again in his pocket. Not Derek this time, but a number he didn't recognize. Area code unfamiliar, and something in the timing of it right on the heels of everything else made the hair on the back of his neck stand up before he'd even answered. "Ryan Carter," he said into the phone. There was a pause on the other end, and then a woman's voice, careful and professional, in the particular way of someone about to deliver news they've delivered many times before. "Mr. Carter, this is Patricia Reyes calling from Cascade Mutual Insurance. I'm following up regarding the claim filed on your property back in September. I'm afraid there's an issue with the settlement that we need to discuss with you directly as the homeowner. It's regarding the amount that's already been paid out to the contractor." Ryan felt his stomach drop for the second time in 24 hours. "What kind of issue?" "I'd prefer to explain in detail, but essentially, Mr. Carter, we have reason to believe the claim was processed with some irregularities on the previous point of contact's end, and depending on how this resolves, you may be looking at a significant repayment requirement." Beside him, Emily had gone very still, watching his face change in real time, the way she had the night before, already reading the shape of bad news before a single word of it reached her. "Repayment," Ryan repeated slowly. "How significant are we talking?" Patricia Reyes's voice, careful and measured, delivered the number, and Ryan felt the ground tilt under him for the third time in 24 hours. This time, hard enough that he had to reach out and steady himself against the porch railing beside him. Patricia Reyes waited exactly 3 seconds before continuing, and in those 3 seconds, Ryan felt every possible disaster scenario race through his mind at once. "Mr. Carter, are you still there?" "I'm here." His voice came out tighter than he meant it to. "Just tell me the number." $14,200, she said. "That's the amount currently flagged as an overpayment on the claim pending our internal review." Ryan's hand tightened on the porch railing hard enough that his knuckles went white. $14,000. "That's correct. For repairs that already happened, repairs that are already finished, inspected, and signed off on." "I understand this is frustrating news, Mr. Carter, and I want to assure you we're not asking for immediate repayment today. But there was a processing error on our end with the initial adjuster who handled this claim back in September, and until it's resolved, the file shows a repayment obligation on your account." Emily was watching him now, with an expression that had gone from concerned to something closer to alarm, close enough that she could hear the tinny edge of the woman's voice through the phone, though not the words themselves. "What kind of processing error?" Ryan said slowly. "Results in $14,000 just appearing out of nowhere on a closed claim. There was a pause on the line, the particular kind of pause that meant the person on the other end was choosing her next words very carefully. The adjuster who initially authorized the claim approved an expedited emergency payout based on documentation submitted by a third party who was not the policyholder, Patricia said. Given the urgency described a structural collapse risk to a child's bedroom, the adjuster fast-tracked the payment without waiting for your direct signature, which is against standard protocol. We're required to flag any claim processed that way for a compliance review, and unfortunately, the review found the initial damage estimate submitted was higher than what the final contractor invoice actually reflected. Ryan felt something cold settle in his stomach. Say that again, slower. The estimate submitted at the time of the emergency claim was for a full roof section replacement master framing, included at approximately $31,000. The final contractor invoice, once the work was actually completed, came in at just under $17,000. The difference between what was authorized and what was actually spent is the $14,200 we're required to recover. Ryan closed his eyes. Emily. She had been the one submitting the documentation, calling the roofers, fighting on the phone for weeks. If there was a discrepancy between an initial estimate and a final number, it wasn't because anyone had done anything wrong. It was because a woman who wasn't even the homeowner had been managing an emergency without full authority to negotiate final numbers on his behalf, doing the absolute best she could with a system that wasn't built for someone in her position. This isn't fraud, Ryan said, his voice hardening. This is a woman who isn't even on my policy trying to save my daughter's bedroom while I was unreachable on a job site. If there's a discrepancy, it's because she was doing her best without the authority to negotiate a final contract number, not because anybody was trying to scam your company. I understand that Mr. Carter and I want to be clear. Nobody is accusing anyone of fraud. This is strictly a compliance and repayment matter tied to how the initial claim was processed. But the money still needs to be reconciled, and as the policyholder, that responsibility falls to you. How long do I have? 30 days from today, before it moves to formal collections proceedings against the policy. 30 days. On top of a job decision due by Friday. On top of a daughter sleeping in a temporary bedroom. On top of a relationship that had cracked open into something real less than 24 hours ago and was already being tested from 3 directions at once. I'll need everything in writing, Ryan said. Every document, every timestamp, every call log from your adjuster. If there's an appeal process, I want to start it today. I can email you the full file within the hour. Do that. He hung up and for a long moment just stood there, staring at nothing, the phone hanging loose in his hand. Ryan. Emily's voice was careful, bracing. What was that? He told her. All of it. Watched her face go through the same progression his own had, confusion, then understanding, then a dawning, horrified guilt that settled over her features like a shadow. $14,000, she repeated numbly. Because I didn't have the authority to negotiate the final contract. Emily, this isn't your fault. It's absolutely my fault. Her voice had gone thin and fast panic creeping in at the edges. I called that adjuster. I'm the one who told her it was an emergency, that a ceiling had collapsed near a child's bed, that we needed expedited processing. I didn't know that would trigger some kind of inflated estimate that would come back to bite you financially 6 weeks later. I was trying to help, and instead I just handed you a $14,000 problem on top of everything else. You saved my daughter. And now you owe $14,000 because of it. That's not how I see this, and it's not how you should see it either. Ryan reached for her hands again, an instinct that had become almost automatic in the last day. But Emily pulled back this time, wrapping her arms around herself instead, putting a few inches of distance between them that felt in that moment like a great deal more than a few inches. How can you not be angry right now? She asked. Your job's threatening to move you 14 hours away. Your insurance company is threatening collections, and somewhere underneath all of that is a woman who thought she was helping and instead just made your life more complicated. If I were you, I'd be furious. I'm not furious at you, Emily. I'm furious at an insurance company that fast-tracked a claim based on their own emergency protocol and is now trying to claw back money because their own adjuster followed their own procedure. None of that is on you. You don't actually believe that. I do. Ryan. Emily, stop. His voice came out sharper than he intended, and he immediately softened it, taking a breath before continuing. I need you to hear me clearly, because I think you're about to spiral into thinking you've ruined something, and I need to stop that before it takes root. You ran into a collapsing room to save my daughter. Everything that happened after that, every phone call, every fight with a contractor, every piece of paperwork happened because you loved her enough to handle a crisis I wasn't there for. If the system punishes that with a $14,000 bill, that's a broken system. It is not you. Emily's eyes had filled again the second time in less than a day, and this time when Ryan reached for her, she let him stepping into the hug, like something in her had finally stopped fighting it. I keep thinking I'm going to lose you over one thing or another, she admitted against his shoulder. First the ceiling, now this. And underneath all of it, there's still Colorado sitting there like a countdown clock I can't stop looking at. You're not going to lose me over insurance paperwork. You don't know that yet. I do, actually. He pulled back just far enough to look at her. Because I've made bigger decisions with less information before, and I know exactly what kind of man I want to be in this. I'm not going to let a compliance department decide who gets to be in my daughter's life. The email from Patricia Reyes arrived 40 minutes later, exactly as promised. A dense attachment full of claim numbers and adjuster notes and timestamps that Ryan spent the better part of an hour trying to make sense of at his kitchen table. Emily sitting across from him with her own laptop open, both of them cross-referencing dates against the timeline of the storm. Here, Emily said, tapping her screen. September 14th. That's the night it happened. And look, the adjuster's notes say, expedited processing approved per Emergency Structural Risk Protocol Section 4.2. That's their own internal rule. They fast-tracked this on their own authority. So why are they trying to recover the difference now? Because the initial estimate for the repair, the one that got the emergency approval, was based on a worst-case assessment. Full section replacement master framing everything. But once the actual contractor got in there and assessed it properly in daylight, the damage wasn't quite as extensive as the emergency estimate assumed. So the final bill came in lower. Emily scrolled further, frowning. This isn't fraud, Ryan. This is exactly what emergency protocols are designed to do: overestimate first to make sure coverage exists, then true up the numbers once the real work is done. The problem is, their own system is trying to claw back the difference from you, instead of just closing the gap and moving on. Can we fight that? I think we have to. Emily's frown deepened into something more focused. Now the panic from earlier replaced by the same determined energy. Ryan remembered her describing the woman who'd sat on hold for 2 hours, who'd refused to let a contractor overcharge him, who simply did not back down once she'd decided something was worth fighting for. Ryan, I still have every email, every call log, every piece of documentation from the entire process. I kept records of everything because some part of me always knew I might need to prove I did this the right way eventually. You kept records. 18 months of loving someone from next door teaches you to cover your bases, Emily said with a small, tired, almost bitter smile. I wasn't going to let anyone ever say I mishandled something that mattered to you and Lily. Not the insurance company, and not you, if it ever came to that. Ryan felt something in his chest tighten at that. The quiet, careful vigilance she'd been carrying this whole time, protecting not just his daughter and his house, but her own integrity in the process, guarding against a moment just like this one without ever telling him she was doing it. Send me everything you have, he said. Tonight. I'm going to build an appeal packet and get it to Patricia Reyes before that 30-day clock even finishes its first full day. I can help you build it. I know you can. That's exactly why I'm asking. PM. They worked through the afternoon and into the evening. Emily's laptop and Ryan's spread open side by side on the kitchen table, a growing stack of printed documentation between them, occasionally interrupted by Lily bursting in from her playdate with an enthusiastic and lengthy report on Marcus's lizard, which apparently could change color slightly depending on its mood, a fact she found endlessly fascinating, and which she insisted on explaining in full detail before either adult could get a word in. By the time the sun had gone down, they had a packet time-stamped emails, call logs with duration and content summaries, photographs Emily had taken throughout the process to document the damage and the repairs, even text messages between her and the contractor showing her explicitly refusing an inflated initial quote. "This is thorough," Ryan said, flipping through the final printout. "This is more thorough than half the paperwork I file professionally for actual construction contracts. I told you, I wasn't going to let anyone say I did this wrong." "Nobody's going to say that after seeing this." He set the packet down and looked at her. Really looked at her, the exhaustion evident in the set of her shoulders, after a full day that had started with a driveway confession and ended with insurance spreadsheets. "Emily, thank you, not just for building this, for all of it. Every single piece of it going back 6 weeks. You've thanked me enough for one day. I don't think I've thanked you enough for a lifetime, honestly." He reached across the table and took her hand, and this time she let him hold it, without pulling back some of the tension from the afternoon, finally starting to ease out of her. His phone buzzed against the table, and both of them glanced at it at the same time. The same instinctive flinch, half expecting Derek or Patricia Reyes, or some new complication to have found its way into the one quiet hour they'd carved out that evening. But it wasn't either of them. It was a text from a number Ryan hadn't seen in almost 2 years, a name that made his stomach drop in an entirely different, entirely unfamiliar way. Carol, his late wife's mother. Emily watched his face change again the third time that day, though this shift was different from the others. Something older and more complicated moving across his features. "Who's Carol?" "My mother-in-law," Ryan said slowly, staring at the screen, like it might rearrange itself into something less complicated if he looked long enough. "My late wife's mother. We haven't talked in almost 2 years. Not since the funeral, really. Things got complicated after that." "Complicated how?" Ryan opened the text, and Emily watched him read it twice before setting the phone down, his expression unreadable, in a way that worried her more than if he'd looked upset. "She wants to come see Lily," he said. "This weekend. She says she's been thinking about it for a while, and with the anniversary coming up next month, she wants to reconnect. She says she has some things of her daughter's she wants to give Lily. Photos, jewelry, things like that." "That sounds like a good thing." "It might be." Ryan's jaw tightened slightly. "Or it might be Carol doing what Carol does, which is show up unannounced, with an agenda dressed up as sentiment. She wasn't exactly subtle after the funeral about her opinions on how I was raising Lily. She thought a single father 4 states away half the time was no way to raise a little girl. She said as much more than once in exactly those words." Emily's stomach dropped slightly. "You think she'd try to take her?" "I don't know what I think." Ryan raked a hand through his hair, the exhaustion of the day finally catching up to him all at once. "She never went as far as lawyers or custody talk, but she made it clear she thought Lily would be better off with more structure, more stability, more someone who wasn't me, essentially. And now she wants to show up this weekend exactly when I'm trying to figure out a job that might mean uprooting Lily entirely. Exactly when there's a woman in my life who isn't Lily's mother, exactly when everything else is already stacked as high as it can go. You think she'll have a problem with me?" Ryan didn't answer right away, and that silence told Emily everything she needed to know. "Carol's old-fashioned," he said finally, "about a lot of things. I don't know how she'll react to finding out there's someone new, someone Lily already loves. It might complicate things in ways I can't predict. Do you want me to not be here this weekend?" Emily's voice had gone careful, guarded the openness from earlier in the day, retreating behind something more defensive. If it would make things easier with her, no. Ryan said it fast, firm, cutting her off before the sentence could fully form. "No, Emily. I am not hiding you from my mother-in-law like you're something to be ashamed of. You are not a complication I manage around. If Carol has a problem with the fact that my daughter has someone in her life who loves her enough to run into a collapsing room for her, That's Carol's problem, not mine and not yours. That's easy to say now. It's true now, and it'll still be true this weekend. Emily searched his face for a long moment, looking for the hesitation that so often hid underneath brave declarations, and seemed to find something reassuring in what she saw there, because some of the tension in her shoulders finally eased. "Okay," she said. "Then I'll be here, whatever happens." Jade. Carol arrived Saturday morning in a silver sedan that pulled into the driveway with the same precise, deliberate energy Ryan remembered from every interaction he'd ever had with the woman. Nothing rushed, nothing careless, every movement calculated in advance. She was smaller than Ryan remembered, or maybe grief had just made everyone look smaller in his memory, but her eyes were exactly as sharp as he recalled taking in the house. The yard, the orange construction fencing still marking the property line, and finally landing on Emily, who stood slightly behind Ryan on the porch, with Lily's hand in hers in a way that made it clear she was cataloging every detail for later analysis. "Ryan," Carol's voice was cool, polite, carefully measured. "You look tired." "Good to see you too, Carol." "And who is this?" The question was directed at Emily, with a directness that bordered on rude, and Ryan felt Emily stiffen slightly beside him before she recovered, stepping forward with her hand extended. "Emily Parker. I'm Ryan's neighbor." Carol's eyes flicked down to the joined hands, Emily and Lily's, and then back up, something calculating, moving behind her expression. "Neighbor?" Carol repeated in a tone that made the single word sound like it contained several additional sentences she'd decided not to say out loud yet. "Grandma." Lily broke the tension before it could fully solidify, releasing Emily's hand and launching herself at Carol with the uncomplicated enthusiasm only children are capable of, and for a moment, Carol's careful composure cracked into something warmer, something real, as she knelt down and wrapped her granddaughter in a tight embrace. "Look at you," Carol murmured, her voice thick in a way it hadn't been a moment ago. "You've grown so much. You look just like your mother did at this age. Everyone says that. It's true. It gets truer every time I see you." Carol straightened, wiping quickly at her eyes, and for a moment, the sharp, calculating woman from a moment ago was gone, entirely replaced by someone simply grieving a daughter through the face of a granddaughter. It was the first genuinely unguarded moment Ryan had seen from her in almost 2 years, and it caught him off guard enough that some of his defensiveness softened despite himself. "Come inside," he said. "I'll make coffee." Afterward. The visit started well enough. Carol had, true to her word, brought a small box of her late daughter's belongings. A strand of pearls, a stack of photographs from childhood and college, and the wedding. A worn paperback novel with margin notes in handwriting that made Ryan's throat tighten the moment he saw it. Lily pored over the photographs with fascination, asking question after question about a mother she barely remembered, and for nearly an hour the whole visit felt exactly like what Carol had claimed it would be, a reconnection overdue and imperfect but genuine. It was over lunch that things began to shift. "So," Carol said, setting down her fork with the same precise deliberateness she did everything, her eyes moving from Ryan to Emily and back again. "Neighbor, how long have you two been neighbors?" 18 months, Emily said evenly. "Since right around when Ryan moved in." "And how long have you been more than neighbors?" The question landed bluntly, no cushioning around it, and Ryan felt his jaw tighten. "Carol, it's a simple question, Ryan. I'm allowed to ask questions about who's around my granddaughter." "Emily has been around Lily for 18 months, Ryan said, keeping his voice level with visible effort. "As a friend, as a neighbor, and as someone who cares about her deeply. What Emily and I are to each other beyond that isn't really any of your business, respectfully. It's my business when it affects my granddaughter's stability," Carol said. And now the careful politeness from earlier had entirely evaporated, replaced by something sharper, more direct. "I came here today because I've been worried, Ryan. I've been worried for 2 years about a little girl being raised by a father who's gone half the year. And now I find out there's a new woman in the picture, and you expect me to just smile and pass the salt. Nobody's asking you to do anything, Corolla. I'm simply telling you that Emily is a significant positive presence in Lily's life, and I'd appreciate if you spoke about her with the respect she's earned. Earned how? Carol's eyes cut to Emily now, sharp and assessing. What exactly has she earned in 18 months of being a neighbor? Emily, who had been quiet through most of the exchange, finally spoke, her voice steady, despite the obvious tension radiating from Carol across the table. I ran into a collapsing ceiling to get Lily out safely during a storm 6 weeks ago, she said simply. I fought an insurance company for weeks to make sure the repairs were done right. I've fed her, tucked her in, sat with her through nightmares, and loved her without asking a single thing in return. If that doesn't count as earning something, Mrs. She paused, realizing she didn't actually know Carol's last name, Whitfield. Carol supplied, though her expression had shifted slightly, some of the sharp edge dulled by what Emily had just described. If that doesn't count as earning something, Mrs. Whitfield, I don't know what would. The table went quiet. Lily, sensing the tension despite not fully understanding it, had gone still in her chair, glancing between the adults with the particular wariness children develop when grown-up conversations turn dangerous. Carol was quiet for a long moment, studying Emily with an expression that had shifted from hostile to something more contemplative, more uncertain. A ceiling collapsed, she said finally, near Lily's bed, and nobody told me. It happened while I was away for work, Ryan said. I only found out myself 2 days ago. And you? Carol turned to Emily now, her voice quieter, less combative. You got her out. In under a minute. Carol's hands, folded on the table, had begun to tremble slightly, and for the first time since arriving, the sharp-guarded woman seemed to fully crack some deeper fear rising to the surface underneath the interrogation. I lost my daughter 18 months ago, she said, her voice suddenly unsteady. And every single day since then, I have lain awake terrified that something is going to happen to the only piece of her I have left, and nobody is going to tell me, and I am going to find out too late, the way I found out about the accident, too late to say goodbye properly. Her eyes were wet now, the composure entirely gone. So forgive me for coming into this house sharp and suspicious of a stranger. Forgive me for needing to interrogate the person standing closest to my granddaughter when I hear the word ceiling and collapse in the same sentence, and nobody thought to call me. Carol, I'm not finished. She held up a hand, steadying herself with visible effort. I came here today half convinced I was going to find some woman who'd swooped in to take advantage of a grieving man and a motherless little girl. I had a whole speech prepared, Ryan, if you want to know the truth. I was going to tell you it was too soon, that Lily needed stability, not some neighbor playing house. Her eyes moved to Emily, something raw and unguarded in them now. But you ran into a falling room for her. You fought an insurance company for weeks without being asked to. You built her a hand-drawn sign to make a nightmare feel like an adventure. Lily told me about the sign the second she opened the door. Did you know that? Before she even hugged me hello, she told me about her temporary room and how Emily made it special. Emily's eyes had filled, unexpected tears catching her off guard. I didn't realize she remembered the sign detail specifically. She remembers everything you do for her, Carol said, and there was something almost like defeat in her voice. Now the fight going out of her all at once. She talked about you more than she talked about the move, or the school, or anything else for the first 10 minutes we were alone together in the car. Emily this, Emily that. I came here ready to find fault with you, and instead I'm sitting here realizing my granddaughter has someone in her corner I should be thanking, not interrogating. The table sat in stunned silence for a moment, the entire emotional current of the visit having shifted so fast that nobody quite knew how to follow it. I'm sorry, Carol said finally, looking between Ryan and Emily, for coming in the way I did. Grief makes people ugly sometimes, even when they don't mean to be. I've spent 2 years being ugly about this, if I'm honest with myself, because being angry felt easier than being sad. I understand, Ryan said quietly. More than you probably think I do. Do you? Carol looked at him carefully. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've found something I didn't think you'd let yourself find again. And I owe you an apology for every time I made you feel like you weren't doing right by her when clearly... Her gaze moved to Emily again, softer now. Clearly you've built something here worth protecting. Lily, who had been watching the adults with growing confusion throughout the emotional whiplash of the last several minutes, finally broke the tension in the only way an 8-year-old could. Are we done being sad now? Because I really want to show Grandma my room sign before she leaves. The laugh that broke across the table was equal parts relief and release. Carol wiping her eyes as she let Lily pull her up from the table, the moment cracking open into something lighter, easier, the storm having passed as quickly and unexpectedly as it arrived. Come. Carol stayed another 2 hours, and by the time she left that evening, something fundamental had shifted. She hugged Emily goodbye at the door. Not warmly, not yet. That kind of warmth would take longer to build, but genuinely a handshake that turned into something closer to an embrace, an acknowledgement passing between two women who had both loved the same little girl fiercely enough to fight for her in their own ways. Take care of them, Carol said quietly to Emily, low enough that Ryan, gathering Lily's drawings from the table, didn't quite catch it. Both of them. He doesn't ask for help easily, never has. I've noticed, Emily said with a small smile. Good. Keep noticing. When Carol's car finally pulled out of the driveway, Ryan came to stand beside Emily on the porch, both of them watching the taillights disappear down the street. That went better than I expected, he admitted. That went better than either of us expected. Emily leaned into him slightly, exhaustion from the emotional day finally settling into her shoulders. For a minute there, I thought she was going to try to talk you out of ever letting me near Lily again. She would have had a hard time. I wasn't going to let that happen. I know. You made that clear before she even walked through the door. Emily glanced up at him. Thank you for that, by the way. For not hiding me. A lot of men would have. I told you, Emily. You're not a complication I manage around. His phone buzzed in his pocket, and both of them tensed instinctively. The day's earlier crises, still fresh enough that any incoming notification now carried the weight of potential disaster. But it wasn't Derek, and it wasn't Patricia Reyes. It was an email notification subject line visible on the lock screen, Cascade Mutual Insurance Claim Review Update. Ryan's stomach tightened as he unlocked the phone, Emily leaning in close enough to read over his shoulder. Both of them holding their breath as the message loaded. Ryan's thumb hovered over the screen for a full second, before he tapped it open, and Emily's hand found his forearm gripping tight enough that he could feel her pulse hammering through her fingers. The message loaded slowly, agonizingly slowly, and then the first line appeared. Dear Mr. Carter, following an expedited internal review of your appeal documentation submitted on September 21st, Cascade Mutual Insurance has determined that the original claim was processed correctly under Emergency Structural Risk Protocol. The repayment flag has been removed from your account. Ryan read it twice before the words actually landed. It's gone, he said, his voice cracking slightly. Emily, the $14,000. It's gone. Read the rest. He scrolled further, his hand shaking slightly now with the release of tension that had been sitting in his chest for 2 days. Additionally, upon review of the documentation provided, our compliance department has noted the thoroughness and professionalism of the third-party coordination throughout this claim. Please extend our appreciation to whoever managed this process on your behalf. Emily let out a laugh that was half sob, pressing a hand over her mouth, and Ryan turned to pull her into him, right there on the porch, both of them holding on tighter than either of them probably needed to for just an insurance email. You did that, he said into her hair. Every piece of that packet. You built the thing that made this go away in 2 days instead of 30. I just kept records. You kept records like your life depended on it, and it just saved me $14,000 and about a month of stress I did not have room for. He pulled back far enough to look at her, and something in his chest, already worn thin from 2 days of crisis after crisis, finally eased for the first time since Carol's car had pulled out of the driveway. One thing off the list. One thing. Emily agreed, though her smile faded slightly at the edges, both of them aware of exactly which thing remained. Friday. 2 days away now. Derek's deadline sitting on the calendar like a stone, neither of them could stop looking at. Yuck. He called Derek the next morning, coffee still in hand. Lily at the kitchen table, finishing a bowl of cereal and half listening, despite Ryan's attempts to step into the hallway for privacy. "Derek, it's Ryan. Please tell me you're calling with good news. I've got a regional VP breathing down my neck about this position. I need more time." A pause on the other end, the particular kind of pause that meant Derek was recalculating something. "Ryan, I already pushed the deadline once. Friday is Friday. I can't move it again without it looking bad on my end, and honestly, man, I don't think I can get you another extension even if I wanted to. I have an 8-year-old and a life here, Derek. This isn't a decision I make in a week. I hear you, I do. But the company's trying to fill 3 regional supervisor slots by end of quarter, and Colorado's the one that's been open the longest. If you don't take it, they're going to post it externally by Monday, and once that happens, it's gone. I can't unpost a listing." Ryan closed his eyes, pressing 2 fingers against the bridge of his nose. What if there's a version of this that doesn't mean 14 hours away? What do you mean? I mean, the whole reason this job is appealing is the promotion, not the location. No more 3-month rotations, a stable base, more money. Is there any world where that exists somewhere closer? Even a few states over, instead of clear across the country. There was a long pause, long enough that Ryan thought the call might have dropped. "Derek, I'm here. I'm just actually hang on." Papers shuffled audibly on the other end. "There's something I probably should have mentioned before now, and I feel like an idiot for not thinking of it sooner. There's a regional slot opening up in the Pacific Northwest Division, too. Smaller territory, slightly less pay than Colorado, but it's a real supervisor position, same no more rotations deal. It hasn't been formally posted yet because the current guy in the role hasn't officially resigned, but he's already told his manager he's leaving for a competitor. It's basically a done deal, just not announced." Ryan's heart started beating faster. "How close is that territory?" "Oregon, Washington, parts of Idaho." Derek's voice had picked up energy, now sensing the shift in Ryan's tone. "Depending on exactly where the base office ends up, that could be hell, Ryan. That could be less than 2 hours from where you're sitting right now." Ryan gripped the phone so hard his knuckles ached. "Why didn't you lead with that?" "Because it wasn't confirmed until about 10 seconds ago, when I actually pulled up the internal openings list instead of just going off what I remembered from the meeting last month. Cut me some slack. I've got 40 people's contracts to juggle." Derek exhaled audibly. "I can put your name in for that instead of Colorado. But I need to know today because if the current guy officially resigns before I flag your interest, that slot's going to get snapped up by somebody already in that division. Today." "Today, Ryan." Ryan stood in the hallway, phone pressed to his ear, staring through the doorway at his daughter methodically arranging cereal into a smiley face on her placemat, completely unaware that the entire shape of both their lives had just tilted on its axis in the span of a 90-second phone call. "Do it," he said. "Put my name in for the Pacific Northwest slot. Today. You got it. I'll have more details by end of day tomorrow, office location, exact salary, start date, all of it. But Ryan, I need you to understand this isn't guaranteed. There could be other internal candidates already circling it. I'm just getting your name in the hat as fast as I can." "I understand. Just thank you, Derek. I mean it." He hung up and stood there a moment, adrenaline and hope tangled together in a way that made his hands unsteady. And when he turned around, Emily was standing in the kitchen doorway, having clearly caught the last half of the conversation, her expression somewhere between hope and fear. "2 hours," she said quietly. "You said 2 hours." "Maybe. It's not confirmed. There's still a chance it doesn't happen." "But it might. It might." Ryan crossed the hallway and took her hands, the gesture so familiar now after 2 days that it happened without thought. "Emily, if this comes through, it changes everything. Same promotion, same stability, same no more rotations. But close enough that Lily doesn't have to change schools. Close enough that we don't have to figure out what happens to us." Emily finished, her voice catching. "Yeah, For a moment, neither of them said anything, the fragile hope of it sitting between them, too new and too uncertain to fully celebrate yet, but real enough to change the entire weight of the room. "I don't want to get my hopes up," Emily admitted. "The last 2 days have taught me that things can fall apart as fast as they come together." "I know. Me too." Ryan squeezed her hands. "But I think we're allowed a little bit of hope, even if it's careful hope. We've earned that much at least." Better. The next 24 hours crawled by in a way that made Ryan feel like he was living inside a waiting room, every notification on his phone sending a small jolt of anticipation through his chest before he even checked who it was from. Lily, oblivious to the stakes hanging over the household, spent the day recounting every detail of Marcus's lizard to anyone who would listen, and Ryan found himself grateful for the distraction of an 8-year-old's relentless narrative, even as half his attention stayed locked on his phone screen. It was late afternoon when Emily showed up at his door, and something about the way she was standing, arms crossed, phone clutched tight in one hand, her expression unreadable in a new and different way than he'd seen from her, yet made his stomach drop before she'd even said a word. "Emily, what's wrong? Can we talk? Just the two of us? Lily's upstairs, we're fine. What is it?" Emily stepped inside, glanced toward the stairs to make sure they were truly alone, and then took a breath that seemed to cost her something significant. "I need to tell you something," she said. "Something I should have told you days ago, honestly, and I kept putting it off because everything else was already so much and I didn't want to add one more complicated thing to the pile. But I can't keep sitting on it, not with everything moving as fast as it is." Ryan felt his chest tighten with a fresh, unfamiliar kind of dread. "Okay, I'm listening. About 3 months ago, right around the time you left for this last job, I got a call from my old firm, the design studio I used to work for back in Seattle before I moved out here." Emily's voice was careful, measured, like she was navigating something delicate. "They're opening a new branch, bigger role than anything I had before. Creative director, full benefits salary that's almost double what I make freelancing now." Ryan's stomach turned over slowly. "Okay, I didn't take it right away. I told them I needed time to think because at that point, Ryan, you were 3 states away, and I genuinely did not know if there was ever going to be an us. I didn't know if I was going to spend the rest of my life quietly loving my neighbor from a distance and never saying anything, or if something was eventually going to change. So I kept the option open. I told myself it was smart. A backup plan. Something for myself in case." Her voice wavered. "In case this never became what I wanted it to become." "Emily, where is this going?" "They called again yesterday. While you were on the phone with Derek, actually, about 2 minutes before you came to tell me about the 2-hour option." Emily's eyes were wet now, guilt written plainly across her face. "They need an answer by next week, too. And Ryan, it's not down the street. It's Seattle. It's not as far as Colorado, but it's not 2 hours either. It's 5-6 with traffic." The room went very quiet. "You've had a job offer sitting for 3 months, Ryan said slowly, "and you didn't tell me. I know how that sounds. How does it sound to you, Emily? Because from where I'm standing, it sounds like you've been keeping a door open this whole time. Even the same night you told me you loved me, even while we were building an insurance appeal packet together, even while you were defending yourself to my mother-in-law, like your whole future was here. You had an offer in Seattle sitting in your inbox. I told you I didn't take it. I never took it. But you didn't say no either. Because saying no meant admitting I was staying here for a man who, as far as I knew, until 48 hours ago might have already been halfway to loving somebody else, or might have been about to move his whole life to Colorado without me, or might never have said a single word about how he felt at all." Emily's voice cracked on the last word, the guilt and frustration finally spilling over. "I have spent my whole adult life choosing people who never quite chose me back, Ryan. My last relationship, the one before I moved out here, I gave him 4 years. 4 years of my life waiting for him to decide I was worth committing to. And the day I finally asked him directly what he wanted, he told me he'd actually been seeing someone else for 6 months and just hadn't found the right time to tell me." Ryan's anger faltered slightly at that something in his chest softening despite the hurt still sitting there. I didn't know that. I don't talk about it. It's not something I bring up over fence conversations about watering plants. Emily wiped roughly at her eyes. But that's why I kept the Seattle offer open, Ryan. Not because I didn't believe in what we were building. Because I have exactly one working strategy for protecting myself from being blindsided again, and that strategy is never letting myself be fully without an exit ever. Not until I'm completely certain the ground under my feet is solid. And is it solid, I mean? Now. Emily looked at him, and something in her expression cracked open raw and honest in a way Ryan hadn't fully seen from her yet. Not even in the driveway, not even in the kitchen 2 nights ago. I don't know, she admitted. I want it to be. I have wanted it to be solid for 18 months. But you're standing here 2 days after finally saying you love me in the middle of a job decision that could take you and Lily 14 hours away. And I am terrified, Ryan. I am so terrified that I've been keeping one foot out the door because some part of me still doesn't believe I get to have this. Ryan was quiet for a long moment, processing the anger from a moment ago, giving way slowly to something more complicated hurt. Yes, but underneath it, an aching recognition of exactly why she'd done what she'd done. I understand why you kept it open, he said finally. I don't love that you didn't tell me, but I understand it. I'm telling you now. You're telling me now because you have to, not because you chose to. He said it gently without accusation, but the observation landed anyway, and Emily flinched slightly. Emily, I need you to hear something, and I need you to actually hear it, not just brace for the next blow because I think that's what you've been doing since the moment you walked in here. Okay, I'm not upset that you protected yourself. God knows I understand needing an exit plan better than almost anyone. I spent 3 years telling myself I'd never let anyone close again after Sarah died. Because losing someone once was enough pain for one lifetime, and I built my whole life around not risking that twice. Ryan reached for her hands, and this time she let him take them, though her fingers trembled slightly in his grip. But I need you to understand something too. I am not going anywhere, Emily. Not to Colorado, not to some other version of complicated. I am choosing this. I am choosing you, and I need to know if you're capable of choosing back without a backup plan sitting in your pocket. Emily's breath caught tears spilling freely now. I want to be capable of that, she whispered. I want that so badly it terrifies me. Then let's find out together. Call them back. Tell them no. Just like that. Not just like that. I know it's not simple. But Emily, you've spent this whole conversation telling me why you kept the door open, and I've listened, and I understand it. Now I'm asking you to close it. Not because I'm demanding it, but because I think some part of you already wants to, and you're just waiting for someone to tell you it's safe. Emily stood there for a long moment, phone still clutched in her hand, the Seattle number sitting somewhere in her recent calls like a small quiet threat. If the Pacific Northwest job doesn't come through, she said slowly, if Derek calls tomorrow and says Colorado's the only option left, what then? Then we figure it out. Together. The way we said we would. Ryan's voice was steady, certain in a way that seemed to settle something in her. I'm not asking you to burn every bridge before I've even confirmed mine. I'm asking you to trust that whatever happens, we're going to face it as a team, instead of 2 people quietly keeping backup plans from each other. Slowly, Emily nodded, wiping her face with the back of her hand. Okay, she said. Okay, I can do that. Yeah. A small, watery laugh escaped her. God, Ryan, we've known each other for 18 months, and it took a collapsing ceiling, and a mother-in-law interrogation, and 2 separate job offers to get us both to just say the actual truth out loud. Better late than never, she agreed. And for a moment the tension in the room eased, both of them holding on to something fragile but real, something that had survived 2 days of stress tests that would have broken most new relationships entirely. Derek called the next morning at 8:15, and Ryan answered on the first ring. Emily sitting across the kitchen table, with her hands wrapped around a coffee mug. She wasn't drinking from both of them, frozen in the particular stillness of people waiting for news that could go either way. "Ryan, I've got an answer." "Tell me. Pacific Northwest slot is yours if you want it. Regional supervisor based out of the Portland office. That's about 90 minutes from where you're sitting right now, give or take traffic. Same pay bump as Colorado, actually slightly better once you factor in cost of living adjustments. No more rotations. Home every night." Ryan felt something in his chest release so completely that he had to grip the edge of the table to steady himself. 90 minutes, he repeated. Not 14 hours, 90 minutes. 90 minutes, Derek confirmed. You'd start in 3 weeks. There'd be a transition period, some travel to the current Colorado team for training, maybe 2 weeks total. But after that, you're home. For good this time. No more 3-month rotations ever again. Ryan looked up at Emily, who had gone completely still across the table, watching his face with an expression caught somewhere between hope and disbelief. "I'll take it," Ryan said, his voice thick. "Derek, I'll take it." "Fantastic. I'll send the formal offer letter this afternoon. Welcome to management, man. You earned it." Ryan hung up the phone and sat there a moment. The weight of the last week finally fully lifting off his shoulders, replaced by something lighter than he'd felt in longer than he could remember. 90 minutes, Emily said softly, like she needed to hear it again to believe it. Not Colorado. Not 14 hours. 90 minutes and home every night. "Home every night," Ryan confirmed, and the smile that broke across his face was the first truly unguarded one Emily had seen from him since he'd stepped out of his truck a week ago. "Emily, I don't have to choose between this job and you and Lily's whole life here. I get to have all of it." Emily was around the table before he'd finished the sentence, arms around his neck. And Ryan caught her lifting her slightly off the ground in a way that made her laugh bright and unguarded into his shoulder. "You're not going anywhere," she said, half question, half declaration, like she needed to say it out loud to fully believe it. "I'm not going anywhere," Ryan confirmed. "Except Portland, 90 minutes away, home every single night." Lily's voice rang out from the doorway before either of them could say anything else. "Are you guys hugging? Why are you hugging? Did something good happen?" Ryan set Emily down and turned to find his daughter standing there in mismatched pajamas, hair sticking up in every direction. Watching the two of them with the particular curiosity of a child who has clearly walked in on something significant. "Something very good happened, Bug," Ryan said, crouching down to her level. "Daddy got a new job, a really good one, and guess what it means? I'm never going away for 3 months again. Not ever." Lily's whole face transformed disbelief, giving way to pure, uncomplicated joy. "Never, like ever, 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 ever. So you're gonna be at every single one of my school things now, even the boring ones." "Even the boring ones." Lily let out a shriek of delight and threw herself at him, and Ryan caught her lifting her up the same way he'd lifted Emily a moment earlier, the whole kitchen suddenly filled with the kind of joy that had felt impossible to imagine just a week ago, standing in a driveway watching a woman run barefoot toward him with news he never could have predicted. The celebration lasted through breakfast, through Lily's insistence on making a "We're Staying" banner out of construction paper that ended up taped crookedly across the kitchen doorway, through an afternoon where the three of them walked to the ice cream shop downtown, just because Ryan felt for the first time in longer than he could remember, like celebrating something simply for the joy of it. It wasn't until they were walking home, ice cream mostly finished, Lily skipping ahead of them along the sidewalk, that Emily's phone buzzed in her pocket. She glanced at it, and Ryan watched her expression shift, the easy warmth of the afternoon suddenly clouding over with something more complicated. "What is it?" "Seattle," Emily said quietly. "They're following up. They want an answer by end of day tomorrow." Ryan felt the good mood of the afternoon settle into something more serious, though not fearful this time, steadier, more grounded than it had been 2 days ago when this same subject had cracked open into an argument. "You said you'd call them back. Tell them no." "I know, I was going to. I just..." Emily stopped walking, staring down at the phone in her hand like it held more weight than it should. It's strange, Ryan. This offer used to feel like a lifeline. My backup plan, my proof that I had options if everything here fell apart. And now that everything here is actually working, actually solid, I look at this text and I don't feel relief that I still have an escape route. I just feel like it's in the way. So call them. Right now. Right now, while Lily's busy pretending that crack in the sidewalk is lava. Ryan nodded toward his daughter, who was indeed hopping elaborately around a section of pavement several feet ahead, completely absorbed in her own imaginary crisis. Emily, you don't need a backup plan anymore. You have something real. Close the door. Emily looked at the phone a moment longer, then took a breath and dialed, holding it to her ear, while Ryan waited beside her, watching her face as the call connected. Hi, yes, this is Emily Parker, returning your call about the creative director position. A pause. I appreciate the offer genuinely, but I need to withdraw my name from consideration. I've decided to stay in Oregon. My life is here. Another pause, listening to whatever response came back. Thank you. I appreciate that. Take care. She hung up, and for the moment just stood there on the sidewalk, phone still in her hand, something settling visibly across her whole body. A kind of stillness that hadn't been there before, like she'd finally set down a weight she'd been carrying so long, she'd forgotten what it felt like to be without it. How do you feel? Ryan asked. Terrified, Emily admitted, and then laughed a real laugh, bright and surprised. Terrified and lighter than I've felt in years, both at once. Is that normal? I think that's exactly normal. Emily slipped her hand into his, and they walked the rest of the way home together. Lily still skipping ahead of them around imaginary hazards, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the sidewalk. And for the first time in a week, that had held storms and ceilings, and insurance battles, and job offers, and a hostile mother-in-law turned unlikely ally. Everything finally quietly felt like it might actually be settling into place. It lasted exactly until they reached the driveway, where a car neither of them recognized sat parked in front of Ryan's house, and a woman Ryan hadn't seen in over a year stepped out of it, arms crossed. Expression unreadable, watching the three of them approach, with something that looked distinctly like judgment already forming behind her eyes. Ryan Carter, the woman said, her voice cool and clipped. We need to talk. About Lily's school enrollment, and about a few concerns I've had for quite some time regarding her home situation. Ryan felt Emily's hand tighten around his, and beside him, Lily had gone very still, staring at the woman with an expression that was somewhere between recognition and dread. That's Mrs. Ferris, Lily whispered. From the school. She's the one who talks to kids whose parents are having problems. Mrs. Ferris's eyes moved slowly from Ryan to Emily to Lily, cataloging the scene in front of her, with the same clinical detachment Ryan remembered from parent-teacher conferences 2 years ago, back when Sarah had still been alive, and these meetings had always felt routine instead of threatening. Mrs. Ferris, Ryan said, keeping his voice even, despite the alarm bells going off in his chest. This is unexpected. Is everything okay? That's actually what I'm here to determine. She glanced down at a folder tucked under her arm, then back up at him. Do you have a few minutes? I'd prefer to speak somewhere private. Lily's hand had found Emily's again, gripping tight. Her earlier joy from the ice cream walk completely evaporated, replaced by the wary stillness of a child who understood on some instinctive level that adults showing up unannounced with folders rarely meant good news. Bug, Ryan said gently, crouching to her level. Why don't you go inside and start your homework? I'll come check on you in a few minutes. Am I in trouble? No, sweetheart, nobody's in trouble. I just need to talk to Mrs. Ferris about grown-up school stuff. Lily hesitated, glancing at Emily as if seeking a second opinion, and Emily gave her a small, reassuring nod. Go on, honey. I'll come check on you too. Once the front door closed behind Lily, Mrs. Ferris turned back to Ryan, her expression softening slightly, though the folder remained pressed firmly against her side. I want to be upfront with you, she said. This isn't a formal visit. I'm not here in any official capacity that requires paperwork yet. But I received a call 3 days ago, a concerned call from someone identifying themselves as a family friend, expressing worry about Lily's living situation. Specifically, they mentioned a father who travels extensively for work extended periods, where the child is in the care of a non-relative neighbor, and a recent incident involving structural damage to the home that the caller felt hadn't been properly reported to appropriate authorities. Ryan felt the blood drain from his face. Someone called the school. About us. About Lily's welfare, yes. Who? I'm not able to disclose that information. Reports like this are typically kept confidential to protect the person making them, especially if there's any concern about retaliation. Mrs. Ferris's voice remained professionally neutral, but something in her eyes suggested she understood exactly how unwelcome this conversation was. I want to stress, Mr. Carter, that I am not accusing you of anything. My role right now is simply to gather information and assess whether there's any legitimate concern that needs to be escalated. Most of the time, calls like this turn out to be nothing more than a misunderstanding, or frankly, someone with an agenda. Emily had gone very still beside Ryan, and he could feel the tension radiating off her. The same protective instinct that had sent her running into a collapsing ceiling, now coiled tight and ready to fight a different kind of danger. Someone with an agenda, Emily repeated slowly. Mrs. Ferris, can you at least tell me if this person described themselves as male or female? I'm not asking you to break confidentiality about their identity. I'm asking a broader question. Mrs. Ferris hesitated, clearly weighing professional boundaries against the obvious sincerity in front of her. I can tell you the call came from a male voice. That's all I'm comfortable sharing. Emily's face went through several rapid changes. Confusion, then dawning realization, then something that looked distinctly like fury. Emily, Ryan asked, you know who this is? I think I do. Her jaw was tight, her hands curling into fists at her sides. Ryan, I need to tell you something, and I should have told you the second it happened, but with everything else going on, I genuinely forgot it even mattered. Tell me. About a week ago, right before you got home, actually my ex called me. David, the one from Seattle, the one I told you about. Emily's voice had gone sharp brittle. He heard through a mutual friend that I'd turned down some project we'd apparently discussed years ago, and he tracked down my number and called out of nowhere, trying to get back in touch. I told him I wasn't interested, that I'd moved on, that there was someone else in my life now. And he didn't take it well. He got strange, Ryan. Asked a lot of pointed questions about you, about your job, about how often you traveled, about whether it was appropriate that I was basically raising some other man's kid. I told him it was none of his business, and hung up. I honestly didn't think about it again until right now. Ryan felt something cold and furious settle in his chest. You think he called the school? I think it's exactly the kind of thing he'd do, Emily said, her voice shaking now with anger rather than fear. David doesn't handle rejection well. He's never once in the entire time I knew him been able to simply let something go. If he found out I was happy, really happy with a family that wasn't his, I could absolutely see him deciding the way to hurt me was to go after the people I love. Mrs. Ferris, who had been listening to this exchange with growing interest, cleared her throat gently. I want to be clear that regardless of the caller's motivation, I still have a professional obligation to assess the actual situation independent of why the report was made. Even a malicious report sometimes reveals something real, so I do need to ask some questions. Ask them, Ryan said. Ask whatever you need to ask. Mrs. Ferris opened her folder, glancing over a checklist Ryan couldn't quite see. Is it true that you were away from home for an extended work assignment, approximately 3 months, during which time your daughter was primarily cared for by a non-relative neighbor? Emily checked in on her regularly. Yes, but Lily was never without appropriate adult supervision. There's a system in place. Emily has emergency contact authorization. The school has her listed. Everything is documented. And the structural damage to the home. Was that reported to any authority beyond the insurance company? It didn't need to be, Ryan said, an edge creeping into his voice despite his effort to stay calm. It was a storm-related repair handled through my homeowner's insurance, fully documented, fully resolved. There's no requirement to report roof damage to Child Protective Services, Mrs. Ferris, if that's what you're implying. I'm not implying anything, Mr. Carter. I'm gathering facts. Her tone remained even professional, But Ryan could see the slight softening at the corners of her mouth, the growing sense that whatever concerning narrative had been painted for her over the phone was rapidly falling apart under actual scrutiny. "Can I ask, during the period your daughter was displaced from her bedroom, where did she sleep?" "With me initially the same night it happened," Emily said. "And then in my guest room for 11 nights, while the immediate repairs were being coordinated until Ryan's home office was converted into a temporary room for her. She was never anywhere without full supervision, warmth, food safety. I have photographs. I have a hand-drawn sign she made herself to make the whole thing feel like an adventure instead of a crisis." "You have photographs. I document everything." Emily said, something fierce entering her voice now. "I learned that the hard way with the insurance company, and honestly, Mrs. Ferris, if there's ever a version of my life where someone questions how well I cared for this child, I want to have proof, because I have never in my life taken care of anyone as carefully as I have taken care of Lily Carter." Mrs. Ferris studied her for a long moment, something shifting behind her professional composure. "May I see the photographs?" Emily pulled out her phone without hesitation, scrolling through a folder that opened to reveal exactly what she'd described. Lily, asleep peacefully in the guest room. The hand-drawn sign taped to the office door. Home-cooked meals. A homework table set up with careful attention to detail. A school project completed on time with visible enthusiasm, despite the chaos surrounding it. Mrs. Ferris scrolled through slowly, her expression softening further with each image. "This is remarkably thorough documentation for someone who wasn't legally required to keep any of it. I told you, I document everything." "You do this out of habit or out of fear?" Emily's throat tightened, and for a moment, her earlier fierceness gave way to something more vulnerable. "Both, honestly. I've learned that the world doesn't always believe good intentions unless you can prove them. I wasn't going to let anyone ever question whether I loved this little girl enough to take proper care of her." Mrs. Ferris closed the phone gently and handed it back, her expression having transformed entirely from the guarded, cautious professional who'd arrived 20 minutes ago. "Mr. Carter, Miss Parker," she said. "I want to be honest with you both. I've done this job for 11 years. I have walked into homes with genuine, serious concerns, and I have walked into homes where the report was clearly fabricated by someone with a personal vendetta. What I am seeing here tonight is unmistakably the second kind." Relief crashed through Ryan so hard his knees actually wobbled slightly. "So there's nothing further. There will be a note in the file indicating the report was investigated and found to be unsubstantiated, which is standard procedure, regardless of outcome. But no, Mr. Carter, I have no concerns about Lily's welfare, if anything." Mrs. Ferris allowed herself a small, genuine smile, the first since she'd arrived. "I'd say this is one of the more well-documented, well-loved households I've assessed in quite some time. Whoever made this call did you both a disservice trying to weaponize concern for a child as a tool for something else entirely." "Can you tell us anything else about the caller?" Emily asked. "I know you said you can't share their identity, but is there any way to flag that this specific report was made in bad faith, so it doesn't come back around again? I'll note in the file that the report appears to have been made with personal motivation unrelated to genuine child welfare concerns. That should provide some protection if anything similar happens in the future." Mrs. Ferris closed her folder fully, now tucking it back under her arm. "For what it's worth, I hope you find some peace after this. It's clear you've both been through quite a lot recently." "You have no idea," Ryan said with a tired, disbelieving laugh. Mrs. Ferris said her goodbyes and walked back toward her car, and the moment she was out of earshot, Ryan turned to Emily, all the fear and adrenaline of the last 20 minutes finally draining out of him at once. "David," he said, "your ex tried to have Child Protective Services investigate us because you rejected him." "I think so. I can't prove it, not for certain, but the timing, the details, it's exactly the kind of thing he'd do." Emily's hands were still shaking slightly, and Ryan reached out to still them, holding both her hands in his, the way he had a dozen times over the last week, an anchor that had become as natural as breathing. "I'm calling him." Ryan said something hard, entering his voice. "Ryan, don't." It'll just give him what he wants, which is a reaction. I don't care what he wants. Nobody threatens my family and gets to walk away without hearing exactly how badly that decision backfired. Ryan's jaw was tight, his voice steady, despite the anger underneath it. I'm not going to threaten him, Emily. I'm not going to do anything he could twist into something. I just want him to know it didn't work. That instead of breaking us apart, it made us stronger. That every single thing he tried to use against us turned out to prove exactly how solid what we've built actually is. Emily searched his face for a long moment, and something in what she found there seemed to settle whatever fear had been building in her chest. Okay, she said finally. Call him, but put it on speaker. I want to hear this. The call connected on the third ring, and David's voice came through cautious, wary, clearly recognizing the unfamiliar number wasn't a coincidence. Who is this Ryan Carter? He kept his voice level, controlled, though every word cost him effort. I believe you called my daughter's school 3 days ago. Silence stretched on the other end, long enough that Ryan almost thought the call had dropped. I don't know what you're talking about. You do, actually. And I want you to know something, David, since you clearly cared enough to try to hurt a family you've never even met. Ryan's voice hardened slightly, though he kept it steady, refusing to give in to the anger clawing at the edges of his control. The school investigated. They found nothing, because there was nothing to find. All you managed to do was force a very kind, very thorough woman to spend 20 minutes going through evidence of exactly how much love and care exists in this house. Evidence Emily kept meticulously because some small part of her has spent her whole life bracing for someone exactly like you to try exactly this. I don't know what she told you. She didn't have to tell me much. I put it together myself. Ryan glanced at Emily, who stood beside him with her arms crossed, her expression unreadable but steady. You lost her a long time ago, David. Not because of me. Because you spent 4 years failing to choose her, and then the second she found someone who actually did, you tried to burn it down out of spite. That tells me everything I need to know about the kind of man you are, and honestly, it tells me exactly why she's better off here. There was a long pause, and when David finally spoke again, his voice had lost most of its earlier bravado, replaced by something smaller, more defensive. I just thought someone should know the situation wasn't stable. A man gone all the time, some woman playing house. The situation is more stable than it's ever been. Ryan cut him off. I have a permanent job now, 90 minutes from home, no more traveling. I have a daughter who is loved by more people than she probably even realizes. And I have a woman standing next to me who ran into a collapsing ceiling to save my daughter's life without a second's hesitation, something I don't think you're capable of understanding based on everything I've just heard about how you handled being told no. This isn't. We're done here, David. I just wanted you to know it didn't work. And if you ever contact Emily again for any reason, I will make sure every consequence available to me follows that decision. Ryan's voice remained level-controlled, but the finality in it was unmistakable. Don't call her. Don't call this school. Don't call anyone connected to this family ever again. He hung up before David could respond, and for a moment the porch went completely silent, the adrenaline of the confrontation slowly bleeding out of both of them. Emily let out a long, shaky breath. I can't believe you just did that. I meant every word of it. I know you did. She stepped into him, wrapping her arms around his waist, pressing her face into his shoulder. Thank you. For not letting him just disappear into the background like some ghost I have to keep being afraid of. For making it clear out loud that he doesn't get to touch this. He never did, Ryan said quietly, holding her close. Not really. He just didn't know it yet. The evening settled into something quieter. After that, the adrenaline of the confrontation slowly giving way to exhaustion. The kind that comes after a body has spent too long braced for impact, and finally allows itself to relax. Lily, blessedly unaware of most of what had unfolded on the porch, spent dinner recounting an elaborate and entirely fictional story about what she imagined Marcus's lizard might be thinking at any given moment, and both adults found themselves laughing harder than the joke probably warranted, grateful for the simple, uncomplicated joy of it. It was after Lily had gone to bed, the house finally quiet, that Ryan found Emily sitting on the back porch steps, staring out at the yard where the orange construction fencing still marked the boundary line between their two properties. A boundary that in every way that mattered had stopped meaning anything weeks ago. He sat down beside her without a word, and for a while they just sat together in the quiet. The events of the day settling slowly into something they could finally begin to process. "Can I tell you something?" Emily said eventually. "Always. A week ago, before you pulled into that driveway, I had convinced myself I was going to spend the rest of my life loving you quietly from next door and never say a word about it. I had a whole plan. Watch you from a distance, help where I could never ask for anything, never risk anything." She let out a small disbelieving laugh. "And in the span of 7 days, I've said I love you. I've fought an insurance company. I've stared down your dead wife's mother. I've turned down a job in Seattle, and I've listened to you threaten my ex-boyfriend over the phone, in a voice I have never heard you use before. It's been the longest week of my life." "Mine too," Ryan said, reaching for her hand. "Do you regret any of it?" "Not one single second." He turned to look at her fully, the porch light casting soft shadows across her face, the same light that had illuminated her that very first night, standing in this exact spot, trying to find the courage to say something true. "Emily, I spent 3 years after Sarah died, convincing myself that love was something that happened to other people now. That my job was just to keep Lily fed and safe and moving forward, and that anything more than that was a luxury I didn't have room for anymore. And then you ran barefoot across a yard because you heard my truck and couldn't help yourself, and everything I'd convinced myself of just fell apart in about 30 seconds. Emily's eyes filled again, though this time the tears carried none of the fear from earlier in the week, something softer now, something settled. "I'm glad it fell apart," she whispered. "Me too." Ryan reached into his jacket pocket, and Emily watched confused as he pulled out a small object wrapped loosely in a paper towel, clearly grabbed in a hurry from somewhere inside the house. "What is that?" "It's not what you think," Ryan said quickly, seeing the flicker of surprise cross her face. "I'm not proposing tonight. Not after the week we've had. You deserve better than a ring pulled out of a paper towel on the same day we survived a CPS scare and a threatening phone call to your ex." Emily let out a startled laugh. "Okay, that's fair. But I want you to have this anyway." He unwrapped the paper towel carefully, revealing a simple brass key slightly worn at the edges. "It's a spare key to the house. I had one cut this afternoon, actually, before Mrs. Ferris showed up, before any of that happened. I wanted to give it to you tonight regardless of everything else that happened today, because I don't want you to be someone who comes and goes from this house like a guest anymore. I want you to have a key. I want you to know you belong here permanently, whether or not there's ever a ring involved down the road." Emily took the key with trembling fingers, turning it over slowly in her palm, like it might dissolve if she looked away. "Ryan, I know it's not some grand gesture. I know a key isn't a ring or a proposal or anything Instagram-worthy. But it's the truest thing I have to give you right now, and I wanted you to have it before another single day went by." Emily closed her fingers around the key, holding it against her chest, and when she looked up at him, her whole face had opened into something unguarded, something Ryan hadn't seen from her, even in their most vulnerable moments over the past week. "You said something to me that first night," she said quietly. "In the driveway. You said I wasn't just your neighbor. I think about that sentence more than I've admitted to you. I meant it then. I mean it even more now." "Good," Emily said, "because I don't think I could go back to being just the neighbor even if I tried. Not after this week, not after any of it." "Sure." 3 weeks later, the Portland office confirmed Ryan's start date, and the transition period Derek had mentioned turned out to be smoother than either of them expected. 2 weeks of training that kept Ryan close enough to drive home most evenings, a small taste of the life they were building. rather than the extended absences of the past. Carol called twice during those 3 weeks, each conversation warmer than the last, her earlier hostility replaced by something that occasionally bordered on enthusiasm. Particularly once she learned Emily had officially moved a significant portion of her belongings into the house that used to be just Ryan and Lily's, and had become gradually and without anyone formally announcing it simply theirs. The insurance matter stayed fully resolved, the $14,000 threat, nothing but a strange unpleasant memory by the time the final permanent fence went up along the property line. Though by then, neither Ryan nor Emily saw much point in the fence at all, given how often the gate between their 2 yards stood permanently propped open. Mrs. Ferris sent a brief follow-up email a month later, a formality closing out the file, noting again that the investigation had found no concerns and commending the household for its documentation and stability. Ryan printed it out and taped it half-joking to the refrigerator right next to Lily's countdown calendar, which had been retired in favor of a new calendar, this one marking the days until Ryan's official start date at the Portland office. The first job in years that didn't require anyone to count down toward another goodbye. David never called again. It was a Tuesday evening, 6 weeks after that first frantic sprint across the yard, when Ryan found himself standing in the same driveway where it had all started, watching Lily chase fireflies across the grass, while Emily sat on the porch steps, a mug of tea cooling forgotten beside her, watching the same scene with an expression of quiet, settled contentment that Ryan had come to recognize as simply what happiness looked like on her face now. He crossed the yard and sat down beside her, and for a while, neither of them said anything content in the easy silence that had replaced so much of the frantic uncertainty of those first difficult days. "Do you remember what you said to me that first night?" Ryan asked eventually. "After I asked you why you were scared to let me say thank you." "I remember. You said thank you wasn't what you wanted." "I remember that too. What do you want now?" Ryan asked, watching her carefully. "Now that we're not standing in the middle of a crisis, now that there's no insurance company or angry ex or school investigator standing between us and an actual answer." Emily considered the question for a long moment, watching Lily dart across the yard, chasing another firefly, her laughter carrying clear and bright through the warm evening air. "I want this," she said finally, gesturing at the yard, the porch, the fading orange glow of sunset behind the house, the sound of a child's uncomplicated joy filling the space between them. "I spent so many years thinking love had to look dramatic to be real, grand gestures, big declarations, the kind of thing you see in movies. And instead, it turned out to be this. A key in my pocket. A little girl who calls me Emily Mom half the time now without even noticing she's doing it. A man who threatened my ex-boyfriend over the phone in the calmest, most terrifying voice I've ever heard, and then handed me a house key wrapped in a paper towel 20 minutes later like it was the most natural thing in the world." Ryan laughed low and warm and pulled her closer against his side. "I love you," he said. Simply the words easier now than they'd ever been that first frantic night, worn smooth by 6 weeks of daily use. 6 weeks of choosing each other again and again, through every complication life had thrown at them. "I love you too," Emily said. "I think I have for longer than either of us wants to admit." Lily's voice rang out across the yard, breathless and delighted. "I caught one. Come look, it's so bright." They rose together, walking hand in hand, across the grass, toward the small cupped hands of the little girl who had, without either of them fully realizing it happening, become the center of the family they were building. A family assembled not from blood alone, but from choice, from showing up, from running barefoot across a yard, because some part of you simply cannot help itself when the person you love finally comes home. Ryan Carter had spent 3 years believing that home was something he'd lost forever the day his wife died, something that could never be rebuilt, only survived. He had been wrong. Home had been waiting for him the entire time right next door in the shape of a woman who watered his plants and left casseroles on his porch and never once asked for anything in return until the night she finally did. And everything he thought he understood about loss and love and second chances rearranged itself into something whole again. Home was not the walls or the roof or the fence that no longer needed to divide anything at all. Home was Emily running toward him. Home was Lily laughing in the dark, with a firefly cupped gently in her hands. Home was the family he had almost let himself believe he didn't deserve to have twice in one lifetime, and now, finally, fully unmistakably had.